Hello, my name is Kay Herring, and I welcome you to Candidates Up Front, a public interest program of Berks Community Television, BCTV, and the League of Women Voters of Berks County. Candidates Up Front will introduce voters to candidates running in this year's primary to be held on May 19th. Contested races for this primary are in Pennsylvania Senate District 48 and Pennsylvania House Districts 126, 128, and 130. A primary election is where Democrats and Republicans choose their candidates for the November ballot. There are no ballot questions this primary season, so only voters who have registered as a Democrat or a Republican can vote. To check your voting status, you can go to Pennsylvania's state website, vote.pa.gov. That's vote.pa.gov. And there you can register to vote, change your party designation, locate your polling place, or apply for a mail-in ballot and get lots of other information about the election. To change your party designation, which can be done at any time, follow instructions on that website to update your registration. You may change your party designation even if it is just so that you can vote in this primary. You can also call the local Election Services office at 610-478-6490. The deadline to register is May 4th, and the deadline to apply for a mail-in ballot is May 12th. We are interviewing candidates who wanted to be interviewed in contested races only. For each race, the candidates will get the same questions and will have the same amount of time to answer them. Let's begin.
Hello, my name is Nanette Dunford, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of Berks County. Today's interview is with a candidate running for the 48th Pennsylvania State Senate District. Two candidates are competing for this office, Republican Clovis Crane and Republican Chris Gebhard. The district includes Burnville, Hamburg, Leesport, Robisonia, Shoemakersville, Wernersville, Womelsdorf, Lebanon County, and parts of northern Lancaster County. State senators serve a 4-year term in the state legislature in Harrisburg. They initiate legislation and vote to create laws. They pass the budget, including taxes and expenditures of the state. They help constituents with issues regarding state government. The salary for a state senator is about $110,000 per year, plus benefits and expenses. Please note that the opinions expressed in this interview are those of the candidate and are not the opinions of the League of Women Voters or of BCTV. This interview is with Chris Gebhard. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Nan. Good to be with you today.
Mr. Gebhard, please tell our viewers about yourself and why you're running.
Well, it's wonderful to spend time with you this afternoon. I am just finishing up my first full term in the state senate, so just finishing up that 4-year term. I was new to politics when I decided to run for the first time. I had never been elected to any other office, and I was just really frustrated with the way I saw the state going in the direction of the Commonwealth, and that was really what made my decision to get involved. And the first 4 years has certainly been educational. It's a crash course in how government works, but I think we've had some success, and we've set ourselves up where our team has really been able to deliver some great things for the 48th district, and I think we have more work to do, and that's why I've decided to run for re-election.
Well, thank you. When the United States counts its population, the census, there always changes the number of voters in each district. That needs to be evened out by redistricting in Pennsylvania for legislative districts. Should that be done by legislators, the current system, or by a nonpartisan group? Whoever does it, should there be rules of what they can and cannot do? Tell us your thoughts.
So I certainly appreciate the need and the desire to end what the gerrymandering that we see in the current system. If you look at the current electoral maps, I mean, there are some maps that make very little sense outside of there was an intention to structure them that way. But I still believe that the current system can work. I don't believe that we need to tear it apart and start with something new. I think if you have people that are involved in the system that understand what those maps should look like and understand what fairness should look like, the system can work. It has worked for what is going on 250 years in this country's history. I've heard people talk about the commission idea, and while on its surface it appears to be a good idea, I worry that you take a non-political group, give it a political process, and then expect it to not become political. I think that's a challenge, and I think you certainly would see that become an issue down the road.
What are the 2 or 3 issues on which, if elected, you feel you can make a difference?
So I'll talk a little bit about some of the issues that we worked on over the last 4 years. One of the things that I hear most from our constituents is that the cost of living in the Commonwealth has gotten higher and higher, and it's been more difficult for people to make ends meet in today's society. So we need to figure out a way that government could be an assistance there. One of the things I'm most proud of is we passed legislation just recently out of the Senate that provided the largest tax cut in the history of the Commonwealth. It was basically $3 billion. It lowered our income tax percentages that we charge our population, and it also eliminated the utility tax that's on everyone's electric bill. $3 billion is real money. That puts money back into people's pockets. I think we also need to look at the property tax issue. Property taxes have been extremely burdensome, especially to our most vulnerable population. I've introduced a property tax elimination constitutional amendment so that the people of Pennsylvania can make that decision if they would like to see property taxes eliminated.
On your first day of the session, you will vote for the House Senate rules. These rules say party leaders and committee chairs decide which legislation moves forward. What do you think of this system, and would you try to change it?
I think that our system is working, and I think it works, and it works in this fashion. The majority determines what our rules should be. That's not the majority party. That is the majority of the 50 senators in the Senate. If 26 of those senators are in agreement with what those rules are, then that's what we make the rules. And that's what we do now. It is not the majority party. It is the majority of the senators that determine the rules. And I think that system is working, and I think it's working fine.
Okay. The House and the Senate have been politically divided. What would you be willing to do to get a budget passed on time?
Since my time in office, we've seen divided government. We've never had a trifecta of control by one party or the other. So it's been an issue that I've seen in the years that I've been there. I think our biggest issue and why we've had the problems with delays in getting our budget done is I feel like we get started into the process later than we should. The governor delivers his budget address in the first week in February every year, and we hold appropriations hearings after that. But then we don't really get down into the nuts and bolts of those negotiations until what seems like the first couple weeks of June. I feel like that should start in April. It should start in May. And I feel like the earlier we start, the better we have the opportunity of completing on time with the June 30th deadline that the Constitution gives us.
Well, it sounds like a simple solution. We'll see.
I would agree. Nothing's ever simple when we talk about how our state government works.
That's for sure. Pennsylvania currently has closed primary elections. Only Democrats and Republicans can vote for candidates. 16% of registered voters are left out. That's 1.4 million voters. Some say all registered voters should be able to vote in the primaries, as all taxpayers are paying for it. What do you think would be the best system? What rules would you like to be in place?
I think the system that we have now is currently working, and it's working fine. I've certainly had meetings with folks that are that are registered as independents. I understand what some of their frustrations are, but my response has been, we've made it very easy for you to register to vote. We've made it very easy for you to change your party that you registered for. I feel like if people are motivated to vote in a primary, motivated to vote for a certain candidate, they certainly can do that. That process is not burdensome. It's rather streamlined, and I think it works fine.
The U.S. Constitution gives the states the power to run elections. In Pennsylvania, the state gives the administration function to the counties. Recently, the U.S. government has tried to say more, have more say in how elections are run. What are your thoughts on which level of government should handle elections?
I think the way that we currently are running our elections, where they're run at the local level, at the county level, that system can work. I think it does work. I represent Lebanon County, Berks County, and Lancaster County. I've spent time with the election officials in each of those three counties. I've spent election day in those offices, seeing how they process votes, seeing how they structure the election process. It works in those three counties. We have had very few issues in those three counties. So in terms of the 48th district, I think the system is working well, and it's working to the advantages of our citizens.
It's a big issue.
It's a very big issue.
Yeah. Do you think we have the right balance of powers between the states and the U.S. government? Another big issue. Where should they work together? Where should states have full authority? Which functions should each control?
I think we could take 20 minutes just to talk about that issue,
just
in itself. I think a trend that we've seen over the last 40 to 50 years has really been a trend where the federal government has started to really consolidate a lot of the power that we see in this country. I think you've seen that pendulum swing too much in that direction. I have always been a big believer that I believe that states' rights should be extremely important and should be protected. I think the Founding Fathers established the Constitution in a way that states' rights are very important. It doesn't mean that we don't have functions that aren't delegated between the two authorities. In terms of what the federal government's authority is, I mean, I think their authority comes down to one very important thing, and I think their authority is that they should protect our constitutional rights. That is one of the key points of the federal government. That's one of the key points that is, you know, a issue that is detailed in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution. I think where they can work together. They can work together on things like infrastructure. They can work together on things like public protection. I think they can work together on things like commerce. We have a very diverse economy in the United States. We're blessed with that. I think you need to have good coordination between state government and the federal government so that you don't have regulatory environments at the state level that are making it difficult for multi-state corporations to operate. I mean, you certainly don't want that, and so you want a streamlined process. One thing I think that the state of Pennsylvania should absolutely control, I think should be controlled at the state level across this country, is education. I think you're seeing that I am in full support of what the Trump administration has been doing, where they've been basically curtailing the powers and the authority of the Department of Education at the federal level. They're giving that authority to the state level, and I think the state should also be mindful of that education decisions are best made at the local level. They're best made with school boards, elected school boards, because we certainly know that educating children in the city of Philadelphia is very different than educating them in Berks County, in Lebanon County, or in Pittsburgh. And I think giving the local control there is absolutely vital.
Data centers use significant amounts of electricity and water. Some say this will have a negative impact on local communities. Others say they will not. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think we need special legislation to protect local communities with regard to the data center issue? It's a big one.
That's an extremely big question there.
Yes.
It is a hot button question. It is a question that we have discussions in Harrisburg just about every time that we are there, because it's important, because I think development is important. I believe the tech industry has identified Pennsylvania as an extremely viable place for data center development.
I did not know that.
They've identified it because data centers are dependent on two things. They're dependent on electricity usage and water usage. And Pennsylvania has the natural resources to do both. But here's the problem. We need to make sure that those developments come with protections, that we're protecting the local communities. I am a firm believer that if we do move forward with data center development, we need to do two things, and two things in particular. They absolutely needed to be required to do what we call bring your own power, where they build their own power plant to produce their own electricity to run the center, and they also are required to do grid upgrades so that our population is not forced to have to deal with increased utility costs, increased electricity costs. That's the last thing that we need. So I think they need to bring their own power and produce their own electricity. I also think they need to use closed loop systems in terms of their cooling. The last thing we want them to do is be taking groundwater out and using that to run the system and then pushing it back in, out into the environment. That's an environmental disaster waiting to happen. We need to force them to use closed loop systems where they are minimizing the impact of anything that they'll have on the local community.
Is there a timing? Let me just do a little follow-up. We have a couple extra seconds here. Is there a timing issue for the legislature to act in terms of pending proposals?
I think there's always a timing issue in terms of action on our part, because the industry has identified Pennsylvania as a place we're seeing data center development across the Commonwealth. I mean, there's a hot topic conversation right in the 48th district right now in South Anvil Township in Lebanon County. The local folks want to know that this is not going to be a negative impact to their communities. And I think we absolutely have to make sure that those are the rules that we have in place.
Our Pennsylvania Constitution requires the state to provide 50% of the money needed to run our schools. And while the state has increased school funding in the past several budgets, it is still way below 50%. This shifts the burden to local property taxes. How would you address this taxing issue? Would you increase the income tax, the sales tax, create new taxes?
I think the property tax burden has become a major problem for our seniors, major problem for the most vulnerable people in our society, and we need to figure out a path to addressing that. The state, just in the years that I've been there, has added billions of dollars to the funding that we push into public education from the state side down. I think the first place we need to look at the fair funding formula that we use. That's the formula that we use to push this money out to the schools. I don't think it is allocated in a fair fashion. But I also think that we need to be mindful of how we're spending this money and what we're spending it on. One of the trends that we see across the Commonwealth is we see declining student populations. We are seeing populations that are dropping. And should we need the same amount of funding to educate less students? My belief is that you need to understand that those costs should be allocated based on the number of students that we have. And if those student numbers are dropping, then I think our costs should see less pressure to add more money into the system.
Thank you. Pennsylvania currently has a flat rate income tax. Whatever your income, you pay the same percentage. Should we change to a graduated tax where people with more income pay a larger percentage?
I think the truest form of a fair tax is the flat tax system. And the flat tax system that is in the Constitution of the United States, I think, treats every individual in the Commonwealth fairly and equally. And I think that's what's important. And that's what we should all look for in a tax system, is one that treats us all fairly and equally, and we're all on the same footing.
Please give us your closing remarks. We have about a minute left.
So it certainly has been the honor of my lifetime to serve the people of the 48th District. But I also feel that we have significant work that we have to get done. In my time in the legislature, we've had divided government. Divided government requires compromise. I think what we've seen is a major struggle in finding that ground to compromise on, and that's why I think we need to have more effort that goes into solving one problem, and one problem in particular. I think this is the greatest problem we have in the Commonwealth, and that is our greatest export is our children right now. We are raising them, we are educating them, and they are leaving. They are leaving because there's economic opportunity in other places in this country. And we need to stop that process. If we do not stop that process, we will doom Pennsylvania to, the slow decline that it's been on. And I think we need to create economic opportunity for them. We need to create an environment where we can raise our families, and they will stay here and raise their families and create generational change in the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gebhard, for sharing your views with us. Viewers, today's interview was with Republican Chris Gebhard. Please remember there's another candidate for the 48th Senate District, Republican Clovis Crane. You will find the candidates' upfront interviews on BCTV and the website and YouTube page. Remember, Pennsylvania's primary election is Tuesday, May 19th. For more information about candidates, go to the League's online voters guide, vote411.org. Vote 411 is one and then .org. If you have any other questions about election procedures, contact Berks County Election Services at 610-478-6490. Thank you for watching Candidates Up Front.